Hello, humans.
This is Mike and Dave's Multiverse. Welcome to our series of interviews where we share the experiences, stories, and insights of our friends from all walks of life and all corners of this beautiful globe.
We hope you find the conversation interesting, illuminating, and uplifting. The goal of our channel is to bring people together, so please subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's interview, hit the like button and leave us a comment.
Thanks for watching. We've got Jesse Coomer here, and Humans of the Multiverse, and I'm really excited to have Jesse on board. And honest to goodness, I've read one of his books. I've been following him for about 5 years now. So his work has helped me through some difficult times in my life, like chronic pain, anxiety, stress management. I really appreciate Jesse's ability to kind of use his own body as a laboratory for the rest of us, and then share the results. And I've gotten some excellent health benefits just from following Jesse's channel. There's one specific breathing exercise routine that's about 30 minutes long that probably got 1,000 views from me personally after I had surgery. So without further ado, I just wanted to introduce Jesse Coomer and, take it away. How did you get started in this field and working in breathwork and all that stuff?
Well, hey, thanks so much for having me. And thanks for putting up with me on YouTube for 5 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Come on. We've a lot of things have happened in the past 5 years. Here we are, 2024, near the end of
Yes.
it. And wow, what a ride. So I started in the world of breathwork like I think a lot of people do. I was my own first client, and I suffered from a lot of anxiety. I'm a kind of an interesting combination of extreme extrovert and then sufferer of social anxiety. So the thing that really brought me the most pleasure, the thing that kind of gives me the most joy, is the thing that I overthink about and ruminate about. And I often say if rumination were a Olympic sport, I would be gold medalist every year. And so I was looking for ways to kind of get a handle on that and to try to, at the time I was trying to control it, right? Control. Later on, I found out, that I was looking at it the wrong way, but that's what led me into it. So I started looking around. I heard that meditation was really good for that sort of thing. And so I one day closed my eyes and tried to meditate for as long as I could. And 5 seconds later, I opened my eyes and I thought, wow, I need some help. So I got into, at the time, I was into group fitness and things like that. And I would do like Insanity. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, I did Insanity.
You remember that? Yeah.
What about Zumba? Do you remember Zumba
Well,
classes?
see, my wife was a Zumba instructor and an Insanity instructor. So we were going to the gym. She, I had to go, right? And so she was, punishing me in these classes. It was really great.
That's so cool. Can I comment on that quickly? At the time when I did Insanity, I literally did it 2 months in a row straight. And I've been in the military, okay? And Insanity is the worst thing you can do. Like, it's so hard for 25 straight minutes. And so it's one of those things. It's like, how do you, this is like kind of what I want to lead our discussion towards too, is how do you can talk clients into doing something difficult that they don't want to do? Like, because Insanity is difficult, breathwork's difficult, meditation's difficult. But anyway, I'll let you continue.
Well, and so I was into doing those things. I was really trying to get into fitness, and I was, much of my younger life, I had tried to just make the anxiety, the stress, and these things shut up, and that was just because I didn't understand what they were. And I think most of us go through life, we're not really sure what emotions are. We know that they happen. They're kind of inconvenient, or we feel like certain stress and things like that. And most of us sort of peak out and top out and say, oh, that feeling is stress. And, that's something to celebrate, that you actually a person is able to say, okay, this feeling that I'm feeling the stress response. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot more that everyone needs to know, but I didn't know those things. So I was, drugs, alcohol, tried all those things, and I tried to get into fitness, and I got into that, and I really got into health and wellness. And then I tried to get into meditation, had really struggled with that. But then I was scrolling on the internet, as we do, and I found pranayama the ancient yogic practices, and I started doing some of those. And then I stumbled across Wim Hof, who later on I found out he was just doing pranayama, but he says he's got all these claims, and so I was really taken by that, and so I studied with him, and I was in this first group of people to get to study with Wim Hof, and I worked in that organization for quite some time, and went around the world, did the Poland, led retreats and things with him. But during this time, I realized that it was sort of a short-sighted way of looking at everything. It was very much about the old paradigm of control, and I'm going to control my emotions, and I'm going to control this and all these things. And while I still am a huge proponent of cold training, and I'd love to, if that's something we want to talk about, we can always do that.
Definitely.
It's not for the same reasons that Wim Hof says he's into it. And the thing is, my background is research and rhetoric. So I'm a recovering college professor.
Sure. I actually asked you in the email. I thought you were a college professor and you didn't answer. So
I'm sorry. Yeah, I am.
Okay.
I was. So I later on I got out of that and I do this full time. But I was a college professor for 11 years, and my focus is research and rhetoric. And ultimately, what that is how to nerd out on something and then how to explain it really well and make it usable for other people. We basically synthesize data from data sets and from other people's research, and we ultimately try to come out with some kind of a framework or make some connections that say, okay, maybe this is the direction we need to go, and then we explain it to other people. And so I did that. And so as I was, working with the Hofs, I was also nerding out with all these other things. I joined, I think, multiple cults, sadly enough. I think I joined 3 cults during this time. Accidentally, it wasn't like I was like, hey,
contrast. Can you come up with any pie charts or bar graphs, the differences between the cults? We want you to hash out all the differences. We got all day here.
Well, and I did a lot. Ultimately, my goal here was finding the underlying principles that connected all of this, right? Because it seemed as though a lot of people were saying, just breathe this way and it's the magic cure, breathe that way and it's the magic cure. And there's so many of those out there.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate in 2018. I came under the mentorship of Dr. Otto Music, who was one of the first neuroscientists ever, who still does research to this day. Incredible person. And I picked his brain. Dad joke. I'm warning you, it's going to happen.
Oh, God, it took me a second. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So ultimately, I started really working with him. I was like, what is happening here? What are the underlying principles? And over the years, I developed what is now known as the language of breath, which is my philosophy of breath work. It's not about control. And that's what I found out. It really isn't about control. You're going to hear a lot of people in the breath work. If you breathe this way, you're controlling your nervous system. You're controlling your emotions. Control. It really isn't like that. It's about developing a relationship with the parts of you that you can't control, so that those parts of you can be of better service to the whole of you. And that's what the language of breath is all about. So I wrote my first book, and that might be the one that you read. And so thank you so much. I wrote my first book in 2020, and that is called A Practical Guide to Breathwork. And this is where I do talk about my experience with the Hofs, and not really in depth, but my experience training with Wim Hof. And then I kind of explain how it all ties together. And I give a lot of guidance as far as athletic breath work, as far as altered state breath work. And that book really took off. That was a book that just it's still one of the most recommended books in the world of breath work for especially if you're getting started, to say, okay, this is the book that I wish I would have had when I first started, because it puts it together.
Yeah, may I comment on my experience with the book?
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, I came across literally a title of a video, an image that "Never Get Sick Again." Right. I'm
Ah,
like, oh, that sounds that sounds awesome. And at the time, I was dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure and chronic pain. I'm a veteran with had a bunch of surgeries and injuries and stuff. The thing about it is, on day one of doing that video and doing the cold shower exposure, I was like, I was like, wow, that worked immediately. And I'd never had anything do that to me before. So that's kind of how, and Wim is very gregarious and very, so it's like, but I really love how the kind of direction you've taken it, from a direction of control to a sort of a direction of what did you call it? Not control, but
it's really it's developing a better relationship with the parts of you that you can't control.
I love that. I love that. Thank you.
And
Developing a
because
better
you can
relationship
interface with
with
these
yourself you
things, but you can't just you're and really, why would you always want to control these things, right? Well, it's like, okay, you can't really sleep, you can't really rest, you're always, oh, I better control it, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
what the science and my research and my years of experience with clients and just in my own practice have shown me is that it's more about developing that relationship with unconscious processes than it is about control.
Love it.
Because what you were describing, if a person sits down and they hyperventilate and then they get into an ice bath or vice versa or whatever, you're inducing a large amount of stress hormones, which feel amazing, and they have a lot of pain killing properties to them. And there's a time and place for that. But in many cases now, after all these years, a lot of my clients have been doing this for a while. They're like, I keep doing all these. I'm more stressed now, and all these things. It's one of those things where you can actually do yourself a lot more of a favor by learning how to interface with this conscious and unconscious thing that is you, and then you don't have to constantly worry about control. Then it's just, hey, I wake up. Maybe I definitely still do some breath work, but it's not like I constantly have to do that thing anymore, because once you start to develop a better relationship using your breath, you can go about your daily life and you're not constantly having to, okay, I got to regulate here, I got to regulate here.
Yeah.
You
I
have
think
it.
that's interesting to observe the differences that you described in your life. First, with a time period of partying, which you said, which is a high octane, high energy, high thrill type of lifestyle. You said you transitioned from that towards group fitness and exercise, which is
Mhm.
also a high energy, high octane,
Oh
high
yeah.
thrill, a lot of noise, and right, like, uh, and that neither of those aspects really identified or met the needs that you later on identified with breathwork. I think it's very interesting to compare those two. Even though you made a change initially, there were similar elements to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and you'll find that a lot of times people do that when they come from more of like
It's
the
still
party
undoubtedly
life.
healthier to exercise and do a lot of high energy group fitness than high energy partying, but neither of those is slowing down and taking the time to breathe. That's, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and what I have found in my practice and in my clients is ultimately that we have relied on, and this is where, Dave, you got to read my next book, okay? And
Yeah.
Mike, you both need to read my next book. All right. So the language of breath, and that's what it's all about. So the culmination of all of this research and this experience ultimately led me to say, okay, so all these breathing techniques, the science and all these things, they're valid. Now, the research is done mostly in clinical settings, so you don't live in a clinical setting. Why is it that so many people come to me and they're like, I was doing this technique and then I'm still this way? Well, it's because the way we see ourselves is a bit flawed. So we tend to see ourselves as sort of this I'm in this robot, I'm the driver, this is a machine, and it's a pretty good metaphor. It's a better metaphor than what we used to have before germ theory and all these things. We used to have a metaphor of basically we're the culmination of the four elements. And there's these 4 liquids,
Right.
the 4 humors. And that was better than what came before it, which was, okay, you've got ghosts in your blood and you did a bad thing. That's why you're sick. Right.
Right.
So we've had to adapt on how we look at ourselves. But the thing is, the frame that we put ourselves in affects how we treat ourselves, which then has outcomes. And so what
Yeah.
I suggest is, instead of looking at ourselves as this operator of this machine, we know now, right? So that comes from mind-body dualism. You can go back to Rene Descartes.
And it did come full circle to you did a bad thing and now you're sick. We're just learning that the bad things are different than what they taught us as kindergartners. Maybe there's more subtlety to the bad things. We're doing bad things and making us unhealthy.
Right. Where now it's our food. Now it's our,
Yeah.
plastics. It's all this stuff, right? We need to control,
Well, and there's a certain degree of, and this is why I like the metaphor of relationship better, right? So the relationship you have within yourself affects the way that you have a relationship outside with other people. And, you're always in relationship with the environment that you're in as well.
Sure.
And this is one of the reasons why it's important to have a good, positive inner relationship, because you don't have any control about the outside world, right? So we live in a world where it's and you read my first book, it's foreign. We're in this class of species that we adapt our environment to suit our needs. Like, ants do it, beavers do it, right? We've really passed them all up, right? If you look at the world we live in now, and so we do need to say, okay, so the environment that I'm in is not something that maybe might necessarily be natural. And we're not always in environments that are safe or comfortable. So what we have to do is learn how to make the relationship that's inside of ourselves, really get to know it.
Yeah.
And that's the first step. And from there, you can start to add breathing, and you can add, of course, what we do in language breath is we really focus on that self-awareness.
I like that idea. The first step, that being the first step, is making that identification. I'm a mental health counselor. I'm off work right now, working on my physical therapy. But I've taught people meditation a lot. I've been taught meditation a lot, and it is difficult for people to realize that there's a difference between their thoughts and the observer, right? And the person who's actually paying attention to the inner world, right? And how do you work with clients when it's hard for somebody to see that? It's really difficult for them to not disassociate from their thoughts for even a second or two and just be present. Because I've met people who have like me, even if I'm not practicing meditation, like a 2-second attention span, to stay present.
Sure. And here's the funny thing. Is it, and I think a lot of times we really are hard on ourselves for having low attention spans. Is it that we don't have a great attention span, or is it that we have so much information available to us? The risk of missing out on better information leaves us saying, okay, I'm not going to focus on this. Maybe there's something else a little bit more valuable that I can be focusing on.
That's a very good point, because I even remember as a kid, you had to either tune into a radio or a TV station that had a program that you wanted, know what time it came on, make sure that you were there at that time, or you missed out. Nowadays, Netflix will automatically play videos continuously, serving them right up, or you scroll down and it's an endless list, every movie that's ever been made right at your fingertips. Absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah. So we, as human beings, right, and getting back to your question, Dave, because this is really important, and I certify people in the language of Breathworker program, and this is something that a lot of my students are mental health therapists, and this is because it's when you combine what you already know with what we know when it comes to breath and when it comes to our conscious and our unconscious processes, right? We can't just say, and this is the biggest problem in breath work, it's that people will say, give me a technique that will do this thing, right? As if, they don't realize it, but they're working with this old paradigm. This is a computer.
It's like go to the doctor and ask for a pill for a certain ailment. You take the pill for the ailment. Never mind finding the root cause, right? And you're trying to get them to realize this ain't about doing a particular routine to fix a particular ailment.
Sure. And we
The holistic.
oversimplify everything, right?
Mhm.
And this is part of our unconscious biases. And if you trace it back to our evolutionary roots, it served us to oversimplify everything. Because if you sat around and thought about it too long, you would expend way too many calories, or the snake would actually bite you, or whatever. So oversimplification is something we as human beings we like. And so what we do is we say, well, this is a computer, this is a machine. Give me the thing that's going to punch in the magic data, like the pill or in breathwork. A lot of people, outside of the breathwork world, what's a technique that'll do this, right? Just punch the codes in, and then the machine has to do what I put it in there. But you are not a machine, right? We are 37.2 trillion cells that are all working together to try to survive on planet Earth. And much of what we are is unconscious. And so a lot of my work is founded in what we understand about unconscious processes and how they work and how we see the world, how we see ourselves. So to get to your question, David, the way that I teach a person is I try to reintroduce them to themselves, because there's a lot of, a lot of useful things, the observer and all these other things, but it generally confuses people and it upsets them.
It does. That's another response I get. People they get upset. It can be jarring to people. Paradigm shifting. So instead you're saying you do what?
We're still going to shift their paradigm, but we're going to do it a little bit more accurately and a little bit less esoterically. So what we need to do is say, okay, your brain is a predictive and reactive organ, right? It's constantly trying to predict so that it can put your physiology in the best state. And it's trying to work with what's in the present. Now, you're not aware of it doing this, but it's always doing this, because let me just introduce you to you. And I generally show them a chart of all the things that basically that there is in their unconscious. So your unconscious, and of course, this is one of those things. Now we start to sound mystical and things like that, but it's not. This is decades of research. This is literally what happens. So there's a Nobel Prize laureate, Daniel Kahneman, who wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow. Now he got his Nobel Prize in economics because this is where they're really invested in how we make decisions and how we think, right? Sadly enough, they're really more invested sometimes than everybody else. But what happens is most of us is unconscious, right? So we can point to the fact that at all times, 11 million pieces of information are being taken in all at once, but you can only consciously process, right? So you can only consciously process out of those 11 million pieces of information, about 40 or 50 pieces of information, okay? Your conscious thinking the part of you that you think you are, is only about 5% of your brain processes. The rest is unconscious processes. And this is where we get our gut instincts. This is where we get our biases. This is where we learn implicitly. So implicit learning, is how we learn about how the world works. And we're constantly trying to put together a picture of what the outside world is and what our place is in that world. This is where we get emotions from. So one of the biggest things that it's a shame that we don't tell our kids what the biological function of an emotion is, right? We have all this, well, emotions are just the way that, it's all this silly stuff, but reality is an emotion is a biological signal from the unconscious to try to move you toward actions that in its comprehension, right? And this is still you, right? It's not something other than you, it's you. But in your unconscious comprehension of the way the world works, it believes that it's best for you to paint the world in this way. And emotions feel permanent. They feel like they're incredibly strong, and they shape our movements, right? They direct our actions. And so sometimes whenever I explain this, I explain it to a person and I start with, you're not a tree. Right. So a person was like, well, okay, I'm not a tree, but it's important. Okay. You're not a tree. A tree has a specific plan of.
Do you ever have anyone that contests that though? That
yes, I do. I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, if you're a tree, Raise your hand, and then someone will do that, right?
All right, all
Like,
three of y'all get out right away.
Is a trick question. Trees don't have hands. Ha!
Okay.
You know.
If they pass the first test and they don't,
right.
you know.
But a tree has a survival strategy where, okay, it's going to throw a lot of seeds out, and that seed is going to find a place, and it will be there the whole life. It is incredibly capable. It can create its own food. It's really an amazing thing. We are a different thing. We are organisms of action, and that is every cell in you. All 37.2 trillion cells understands that your goal is to take actions to move you toward thriving and surviving. And it's something in the modern world that we've sort of forgotten. But if a person starts to understand that this is where the stress response comes from. So if you drink coffee in the morning, you look forward to the little kick of energy. But if that kick of energy comes and you didn't drink coffee, it kind of freaks us out. We call that, it's stress. Well, what that is, it's the unconscious you, right? Which is still you. It's more you than the conscious thinking you that you think you are. But it's that unconscious you that's trying to give you energy to take some kind of action. And in this case, it believes we need to take some kind of physical action, which is, for the vast majority of human history, how we solved all of our problems.
Right.
It wasn't through sending a text or public speaking necessarily, or for writing
There's
an
at least
email that solves your
comparable
problem.
physical and mental. Now a lot of desk jobs are mostly mental in exercise, and you drink a lot of coffee, but it's not like you're getting up and down doing exercise. Your mind is focused on sending emails and reading, presentations or whatever. Very different from solving a problem as a hunter gatherer, where you got at least half mind and half body, right? You got to be thinking, but you also got to be running too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I try to get a person to stop thinking about themselves as a mind and a body, and just thinking about themselves. It's all one thing. It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
And when we start to think of ourselves in a different way, we start to treat ourselves in a different way.
That's what I like about what I learned from you in your book. So I was sitting in I went to jujitsu that day, and I was rolling with a guy who was way younger than me, and my back started acting up, and this has been going on for a long time. And your book was in my car. Like, I grabbed it, from the mailbox as I was on my way out the door, and I sat down. I just read it literally cover to cover in the parking lot. And I was like,
wow,
I'm serious. I might be the only person who have done that. I don't know, but
you rock.
But I did. I literally read it cover to cover because it transitioned me out a little bit of like looking for a pill or a one video or this one breath exercise to go, and it did change how I viewed myself, and it started moving me in that direction. So I wanted to circle back around to the book and like how we got there, how you got there. Like, what was your realization? Like, or was it so much longer what was your realization that like, hey, I'm thinking about this differently. Or I'm thinking about this wrong.
Well, I think just like a lot of things, I never really intended to add to the conversation, right? So when it comes to you, for instance, you get into jujitsu or the Gracies. I don't know if when they started, did they say, well, hey, here we're going to change, jujitsu. We're going to change, this forever. We're going to create this whole new way of thinking about this. I myself, I was a mess, and I just wanted to share. And this is one of those things where I always say that, a teacher is a person who is curious and can't keep a secret. And so that was me. And I realized that there was a giant hole in the world of breathwork. There were a lot of brands out there that were saying, do my technique because it's the best, and it's gonna, it's the vote for Pedro thing, right? Make all your dreams come true. Right. And I believed a lot of those things, and I found out that there was a lot of that there should have been more subtlety in their sales pitch, right? And so what I did is I said, okay, I need to write a book that will at least introduce a person, show them approximately what we're working with, what we think we know at least. And that was a practical guide to breath work.
Yeah.
But then from there, at the end of writing that book, and you'll in that book, the germ of the idea was in the book, that book for Language of Breath, because what I kept doing, I kept on researching more from there. And what happened was I came across the work of Dr. Cynthia Price, who has done what is considered to be gold standard research for decades, since the 90s, on the value of interoceptive awareness. And I mentioned this in my first book, about the value of interoceptive awareness. But
what was her name?
Her name is Dr. Cynthia Price. And if you go, actually, hey, if you go to my, in my book, and there's a thing in the back where, it takes you to the website. It's like book extras or whatever. Yeah. And then I have a link to all of her research. So I want
links and all your links
awesome.
Below our video. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And so, so I trained with her, and I was just astounded at just what I think we had been missing and tripping over in the world of breath work for a long time. And this was the value of listening, right, to the unconscious. At least this is how I formulated it. It's very complex, and it's one of those things like it's been said, you want to make things as simple as possible, no simpler. And I think I did that with Language of Breath. And what we learned was ultimately that it has a lot more to do with safety than it has to do with anything else. So when I train athletes, I can train an athlete with this system to run faster, go stronger for longer. And actually my most recent athletic clients were in jiu-jitsu, competitive jiu-jitsu.
Okay, cool.
So Ali Bobe, who is, you're going to see that name more and more in the world of competitive jiu-jitsu. She's been placing like crazy. And she's one of my clients. And what happens is, and like I tell them, is no one wants to think about, okay, every aspect of being a human is involved in athleticism or everything else, right? But ultimately, if I can make you run as fast as you can run, if I can make you think you're going to die, right? Put a gun to your head, you will run as fast as you can.
Right.
It's only going to work 1 or 2 times, right? Either I shoot you or you find out I'm not going to, right? And then the other way, though, is to make a person feel safe enough to do it. And that is what the Language of Breath is all about. It's learning how to develop that better relationship with the unconscious you, which is always trying to protect you, right, to help that part of you understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? Because it's saying, hey man, I'm trying to do the best I can here. I'm giving you these gut instincts, which may or may not be right. I am
probably making your shoulders tense.
Yeah, I'm changing your physiology. I'm changing all of these things because it's what I believe is in the best interest of this organism that we inhabit. And again, I find it to be, what's so funny is in the world of breath work, there's a lot of very esoteric talk and things like that. This is all science, but I find it to be more fascinating. I find it to be, it feels like, whoa, what? Like we're really, what is this? What is this actually happening here? And so when we train a person in Language of Breath, whether it's a person who, I worked with first responders, military, athletes, CEOs, you name it. What we're really doing is we're helping that person to develop a better internal relationship. And we have to teach a person, and this is not easy, but it is something that can be done. We have to teach a person how to decipher the messages that the unconscious is sending. We understand emotion whenever it's like, I know I'm angry, right? Some of those really profound, okay, it's just hitting you over the head. I know I'm hungry, right? That affects us, right? We understand some of how those things affect us, but what we do is we really focus in, and in doing so, I accidentally added to the conversation and breath. And so what we're doing is we're changing the game, and the Language of Breath workers are coming out now from the school, trained in a way that they can apply it to anything. And it's far more, it's a far better way of looking at it too.
Yeah, I think it is too, and it's more practical, and I like how it's kind of divorcing, sorry, divorcing breath work from esoteric like stuff, because that can push people away. Mike
Oh
and
yeah,
I are experiencing that already. Like with we
But look,
sometimes,
I'm not afraid. I digest everything from the Wim Hofs to the woo woos of the world. Some of it's just edutainment, you know. I'm not afraid
yeah,
of a little edutainment either.
sure.
But I appreciate the practical approach that you're taking to what is sometimes a little bit
yeah.
of a woo subject.
It can, and my own efforts to try to teach mindfulness and meditation to people, um, I've had that reaction of like, like almost fear freaks them out a little bit, different the way I was trying to teach them how to look at it. Some people took it and ran with it, but I think it's a personality type sometimes. But what I do think is certain types of people, a lot of people need to look at it the way you're looking at it, which is in a much more practical, science-based, logical approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I learned from I had to go vegan for a lot of times. I went to the woo, right?
Yeah, me
And
too.
what I decided as I was doing this, and I entertained the idea that maybe these things were true. But what I found was that there were underlying principles that seemed to be connecting here, and that was, it just strangely enough what happened to be my profession was synthesizing information that seems to not necessarily all coalesce together, but finding the how they do. And so
Mhm.
it was just an interesting combination of being a former professor, or actually at the time I was a professor. I was still teaching at the university, and then also having this just absolute life changing thing that I absolutely love. And so the beauty is you can be religious and spiritual. You can have any belief that you want, and the beauty is this is all just this doesn't have to interfere with that. So in our school, we have people who are of every different faith and no faith at all, or political or spiritual beliefs or whatever, because it doesn't really matter. Whenever you really look at what we are as human beings, this is what's happening.
Right.
And it can help us even as we look at each other rather than seeing each other as other, right? As the enemy. It's like, wow, okay, so a part of me is trying to protect me. It's forming this whole view of the world. I know that there's bias that's there, and I know it's making me feel and act in certain ways. Now, I know everybody else has this happening as well, and so it can really help not only develop a person's inner relationship, but a person's outer relationship too. Because once
You-
we're calm, once we're coming at each other with some grace, then wow, yeah, I mean that's the world I want to live in.
Me too. And, I think how you framed that as far as like connecting people by like kind of learning that, hey, we're all experiencing this is how this is working and this is how we're connected, is a great way to do it. And I think too, well, I like how you offer that this doesn't have to take away from your spirituality or your spiritual practice in any way, because I've come across that as well, like initially, like, well, what are you trying to show me, like, because I'm insert religion here, and so and I noticed at the beginning when you first started talking to me, you were like, everyone really, really needs to know this. And why do you say that? I know why, kind of, but why? Like, I want to hear it from you. Like, why do you think everyone needs to have this understanding or awakening, or I don't know, bad word, but like realization?
A couple of things. One is when you actually understand what's happening, you're less likely to be taken advantage of.
Mm,
And the world is full of people out there who want to
yeah,
fill in the blanks and say, you know what you're feeling?
yeah.
It's this, and this. Oh, there's something wrong with you, and I've got the thing that's going to fix you.
Here's your
And I want everyone
L-theanine
to know there's
for
I mean,
29.99.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Here's your L-theanine for 29.99, and
Sure,
now
sure.
right.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. And hey, there is a place for L-theanine too,
Of
right?
course,
But
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 yeah,
at the
if
same
y'all want to
time,
talk supplements,
Yeah, we'll talk supplements here in just a minute
I
too.
want to finish. I want Jesse to finish quick, but yeah.
But yeah, but ultimately, I think it's important that people understand what's happening. Most of us think there must be something wrong with me. And if you're like me, I didn't know what was happening, so I didn't know how to work with myself. So I went in whatever means I could find, which was drugs and alcohol, and it works for a little while, right? And then it doesn't, and then you're in a worse position, but all because you didn't understand the messages that you were being sent from a part of you that loves you very much, and you didn't realize it was coming from that part of you.
I love that. I'm gonna make that a quote for our video. I really like that. There is a part of us that loves us, isn't there? And maybe we forget about it once in a while. You were mentioning a bit about you work with, EMTs, high performance athletes, that kind of thing in your school, or military, special ops, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Have you done any work or are interested in doing work with, a veteran who's out of service, and it's sort of a different thing, right? It's like learning to deal with new, PTSD and adapting to life, outside of the military, and as well as like how would you apply breath work to somebody like that versus somebody like a high octane athlete or high performer, somebody who's trying to do the opposite. They're trying to take that PTSD they've got and kind of bring it back down,
Well, sure. And there's, when it comes to how you work with a person, the nice thing is the vast majority, you're going to have to meet the person. You have to talk to the person. Every human being is different. So, there's no, overarching template that you would apply. But I will say that the one thing that we know that is generally at the bottom of our actions and behaviors is going to be a certain degree of safety seeking. Now, what that looks like to that person is going to vary. But whether a person has been, for the victim of some kind of a traumatic event and is experiencing PTSD or other sources of trauma, there's a certain source of you've got danger seeking, right? So, and it's out of safety seeking. And you've got people who are high octane and they got to get out there and they just got to do it. And what you find is that the vast majority of what we are, it comes down to this unconscious part of you that has what we call a core affect, right? And so in the world of therapy, you may be familiar with this, right? So our core affect is generally our relationship with the things that we find to be important in our life and whether or not we're near those relationships. And it can change throughout the day. And there's, even if, like I mentioned earlier, if you're just hungry, it changes it, right? I think we all understand being hangry, right? So we understand how it changes how our outlook is. There was research that was done on if you have to pee, and the degree of if you believe in free will or not. And just so you know, if you have to pee, apparently you don't believe in free will as much, according to this research.
That's so funny.
But the thing is, ultimately, what we find is that a lot of times we will, because we are in this machine paradigm, and we've been here since like the Renaissance. Essentially, this is how we look at the human. Probably just the Industrial Revolution. Actually, is when we start looking at ourselves as more machines. We tend to say this is a different kind of broken than this is a different. And so you need a different part, and we'll put a different part in here. And then in reality, there's so much of it that comes down to I need to feel safe. I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to thrive. And how that manifests itself is going to be filtered through core affect. And that's where we start. And
at your school, right?
Well, not at my school, but that's where I start with a client. So I teach my students how to deal with clients and how to work with clients. But we always start with the fact that that we understand that where a person begins, there is going to be some of those elements involved. And then we have to see, okay, so how in touch is this person with their emotional state, their physiological state. And we go through a whole process of teaching a person how to listen a little bit more to those things so that they can form a better relationship with them. And I've not only have I worked with these people, I've certified people who suffer from PTSD, veterans who come back, first responders from every different walk of first responder. Actually, I developed a curriculum called Breathwork Tactics specifically for first responders. It's offered in the Indianapolis Police Academy, and we're trying to grow that program
That's
out.
so awesome.
So, it's this beautiful thing that I want to share with the world. And the biggest thing that I want to share is that we need to see ourselves in a different way. And when we do that, and I'm not trying to say, hey, look, this is just because I feel like making this thing up. This is what has emerged, and this is where the science has led us.
It's what emerged from you. What you're kind of doing is, for lack of a better word, like science educating. You're taking all this, synthesizing all this stuff, and you're presenting it to, like, people like Mike and I in a way that's digestible and in a way that we can apply to ourselves. And you're distancing it from, the woo-woo esotericness that it can sometimes, which I think is necessary for something like this to be taught culturally at a young age, right? Like I said, I honestly, sometimes I wish that, like, I was taught these principles when I was 5, 6, 7
Oh yeah.
old. I'd be so much more resilient now and have so much more understanding and connection with myself. I'm not mad about it. I don't look, but like, what a wonderful culture we'd live in if we all learned to that relationship between ourselves in kindergarten.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If this is one of the things that keeps me going. I'm coming out with we'll release it on this podcast.
Cool. Awesome.
I'm coming out with a new book. It's a children's book that my family wrote. I have been trying to get my son into breathwork for quite some time, and exactly what you're talking about. I want my son to grow up knowing what all these things are, and so we've got a little book. It doesn't explain the depths of what we've been talking about, but it's a good starting place for little kids, and it's called Moo.
Moo, got it.
A Cow's Practical Guide to Chilling Out, and it tells the story about, and what nobody knows is how cows used to be these really anxious, stressed out animals on the farm. We don't remember this because you think of a cow, you think they're just hanging out, just chewing their cud, really chill. Right. That's because they learned how to moo, and it's the story of how that happened. So
I'm excited. When is there a timetable for release, or how?
No, we were going to try to release it this month, but I recently moved to Chicago, so we've been sort of letting the dust settle. So I think we're going to try to release it for the holidays this year.
Oh, that's a good plan. So you guys moved from Wisconsin, I think, right?
Actually, Indiana. So I was in southern Indiana, and then we moved to northern Illinois. So it's been a big move, but I am close to Wisconsin. I do a lot of work in Wisconsin. I've got retreats there. Yeah, I've got a retreat coming up in January that is just fantastic. We do breath work, we do hot and cold, so heat therapy, cold therapy, just a little bit of everything.
Barefoot walks in the snow.
Oh yeah. So this place is always covered in snow in January. It's really kind of cool. It's a place called Sand Valley, and it's in Nakusa, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So right smack dab in the middle, and it's always covered in snow. So we cut holes in a local lake. We dip in that. We actually, with the ice that we stack it up, we build you a throne that you can sit on afterwards. And then we also, depending on what we do, but we build a sauna tent village, and you can roll around in the snow if you want to, or you can do, a cold plunge and things like that. So
I always wanted to do something like that. I just never.
Well, you got to come out.
I just didn't want to join a cult.
So cult free. It is a cult free experience.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And Mike and I were talking about that earlier. Is maybe we will come out, if it's not January, whenever the next one is, because it's a little short notice. But if we did, we'd probably do a whole episode on your retreat, if that would be cool.
Yeah. Come on out. Hey, and jump into something, right? That's let's see. Today's the 20th. Get into it, buddy. It's January 17th to January 20th. So you got 2 months.
Oh, that's notice. 3 days. That's not terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a 4-day weekend. It's over Martin Luther King weekend too. So you got the 3-day weekend there. Just get out there, feel good.
Yeah, I think we'll have a conversation about that for sure.
Awesome.
And I wanted to ask you. So you've got the book. You got the upcoming two upcoming. You got a new book. You got an upcoming book. You've got the school where you're teaching mental health professionals and other people, and you're also teaching athletes and that kind of thing. In the goal, it sounds like the overarching goal is to just get this message and this information to be like ubiquitous, like, as part of society and part of culture. And I support that mission 100%. What's next? What is your vision for like Jesse's next move besides that?
Well, right now, this is sort of all encompassing. We're working on getting it into schools. So I am working on a program there, and trying to work on getting it into more mental health and nursing. So ultimately, we're trying, like you said, we're trying to make it ubiquitous, but it's a long process. We also have a lot of other breathwork out there that is, it's exploded so much. It's kind of like, hey, we're all of a certain age. It's whenever, remember when video games started exploding and it was just a bunch of crap video games.
Mm-hmm.
You remember? Did you guys ever play the ET Nintendo?
Oh
game?
yeah,
It was terrible, right? So there's, so right now with the explosion of breathwork, there's a lot of terrible things that
I've found a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and so they're also very good at marketing, and they make a lot of claims, a lot of promises. And whenever your promise is more grounded and it's like, listen, I need to re-educate you on some basics about what you are as a human, and it's a lifelong journey. It's like when Socrates talked about, Socrates didn't really like democracy, and he said, maybe it's apropos. He said, who are you going to vote for? The doctor who says you need to eat right and exercise, or the doctor who says eat candy, it's totally fine. But you know what I mean? So right now we have a lot of people still claiming you're never going to get sick again, or it's a lot of fill in the blanks. And so the reality is, I think, far better, but it doesn't make as great of a slogan. So we're working against a lot of the people who have the sort of the footholds in those slogans, those overstatements. And what we're finding is now a lot of people come to us after, sadly enough, they've gone through those times, and the promises didn't quite pan out the way they thought it would. But sadly, even I guess sadder is the fact that so many people are just turned off from breathwork after it's like, well, this I tried breathwork. It's garbage. The person made all these claims, or I had to do this. It just turned into this weird esoteric thing, or they were trying to nickel and dime me here and there. And so right now, in addition to helping bring breathwork and making it more ubiquitous, I'm also trying to clean up the industry, because I really believe, of course, this is something that changed my life, and I'm really invested in the future of the practice as a whole. Even if it's not necessarily my philosophy of breathwork, there are other breathwork philosophies out there that I think are great, that are sometimes overshadowed by sort of the explosion of these other brands that they make a lot of claims, or they've got amazing marketing. So that is another thing on my list of to do.
Got it. So you're a certified a personal trainer and nutrition as well? Nutrition
That's
coach?
right. That's right. So when I nerd, right? And so I became a certified personal trainer, and got certified in behavioral changes. So ultimately how to make behavioral changes, and nutrition coaching, a lot of those things as well. Mm-hmm. So when I work with clients, what I find is a lot of clients come to me looking just for the breathwork technique or whatever, and they need mindset training, and that's what language of breath is. It's ultimately working with your whole self. But yeah. So those things are, if you want to get a good workout, I'll take you to the gym.
Yeah, and I noticed, like Mike was pointing out earlier, that you have a wide variety of stuff on your YouTube channel, and he mentioned supplements. Did you want to ask about any of that, Mike?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. So what about like, is there any supplements that you've tried and you've looked at the research and stuff, and you're like, and because there's a lot of garbage out there too, you know?
So I was, just a little background on me. My family, we had a family nutrition store for about 20 years. And so I worked in the family nutrition store all throughout undergrad. And then my sister took it over. My family's been into health and wellness in one way or another since before I was born. And so when it comes to the world of nutrition, of course, I fell for a lot of things. I think there's always a lot of fads out there, but eventually you do sort of develop a little bit of wisdom. I hope.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I do on my YouTube channel is I review some supplements. Very rarely do I really talk about the supplements that I take, but occasionally I'm like, hey, this is one that I think you might want to know more about, and this is one that's been really helpful for me. And I will say that there's this new molecule called NMN, and you might have heard of it on Joe Rogan or some of these other podcasts.
I've heard of it everywhere. I even took it for a while.
Yeah. So that one is one that I remember whenever it was first sort of coming out, is like 2018, 2019. And Dr. Sinclair was talking about it. You had a lot of buzz around it. They were also talking about NR. And so these are two molecules that the research points to, they increase NAD in your system. And so that is going to basically give you more cellular energy. The idea is that it's going to slow down the aging process by adding more energy to your DNA replication. So ultimately, just in a very simplified, and I'm not saying I am not.
Tell us what NMN stands for. I'm gonna put you on the spot. NMN.
Yeah, what is it? Nicotine. I couldn't say right now.
I couldn't either, even though I've done a lot of. I'm gonna pull.
How about HMB? Have you ever taken HMB, hydroxymethylbutyrate?
Yeah. So HMB. Yeah. So real quick, let me finish up with
NMN. That in my milkshake. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I'll talk a little bit about HMB. So NMN. Whenever you find out what it stands for, I forget what it stands for off the top of my head, but it's
nicotinamide mononucleotide.
Right, easy for you to say. So I mean, it's a tough one, right? And NR is they're both derivatives of B vitamins. So they're
precursor to B3, isn't it?
It's comparable. It's sort of related to niacin, and so, but basically. I started taking that, and I'd seen the people out there talking about it, and I sort of experimented with NR and I experimented with NMN, and then I'm like, okay, this is an experimental molecule, and I know that the supplement industry is not regulated, especially from experience with my family in the industry. So I said, I'm going to try to find a reputable source. So I reached out, a buddy of mine who is also a YouTuber, from his name is Dave from Evolution of Dave. Cool. He had interviewed Dr. Elena Saranova from NMN Bio, and I was really impressed. And so I reached out to her, and I just wanted to talk to her, and she was nice enough to talk to me. And she has like her degrees. She's like a doctor of molecular biology and cellular autophagy, and ultimately she studies the aging process. She's done some research in that field, and so she started her own brand of NMN called NMN Bio because she was also really skeptical of supplement brands. So I was like, okay, I want to take your brand. So can you send me some? I'll do some videos. I'll review it. And so I don't get any money from it, but she does give me some free supplements. So I was like, okay, I'll take the free supplements. I was going to spend money on it anyway. So I thought, hey, cool.
NMN subscription is a lot.
Yeah. It's not cheap. And I think that is, but the reason why I bring it up is because out of all the supplements I've ever taken, that's the one that's moved the needle the most obviously. So
perceptually, or do you have any data like to blood work or anything?
The biggest one, boys, The biggest one was testosterone. And so I'm 43 next month. I turn 44. And so testosterone is something I've tracked since I was 35. And when I was 35, I had low testosterone. And I was like, and of course, this is whenever I was I was Wim Hof everything. I was like, well, sir, you see, I practice the Wim Hof method. So you're probably going to break all these instruments are probably going to be
You tried to
destroyed.
tell him you actually had so much testosterone.
Oh, exactly. I'm
the
like,
dial
just so
went
you
all
know.
the way around and pegged out in the low. So
Just so you know, it's going to be probably you're going to need to take a picture. You call the press. It's going to be that big.
Right.
And it was low, and I was like, oh my god, oh no! Not only do I catch colds, but it didn't boost my testosterone either. Everybody's telling me it was going to. And so I was really kind of upset at that. And so I started to try to make some changes in my lifestyle and things like that. And I was able to get my testosterone to come up a little bit. So eventually I got it to come up to right around 500. So because it started off, it was like the high 300s, which is low.
5's like par for the course for our age, right? I'm 42.
Five is a reasonably healthy number, right?
Yeah.
A reasonably healthy number is if you're in your 500s and you're in your 40s, but I was in my 30s. And so that was like when I was in my late 30s, I was able to bring it up. And basically it was a matter of doing breath that was more relaxing. It wasn't huff and puff so much, and getting better night's sleep and a lot of things that, it was a lot of the things that later on came into part of being language of breath. But then I started taking the Inamin I think it was like 2019, 2020 or something like that. It was right before I turned 40. And I went back for a testosterone test and it was 700 and something. And I was like, hey, look what I got here. And now, there are variations in how, your testosterone is just a snapshot of where you are.
Did you know that before taking the test, though? Could you tell without seeing the number that you had twice as much of something in your bloodstream as a year ago?
Better, yeah.
How much of it is a psychological effect? So I'm getting at.
I will say that I didn't actually, I was actually surprised that it had gone higher.
Okay.
Because it sounds like you were also surprised that it was low in the first place. You didn't necessarily,
I was surprised it was low. And then then as it started to creep up, the reason why I was having it tested, I was like, well, I want to make sure it doesn't go low again, right? And so I didn't notice like it was, a lot of the talk about libido and all these other things. I didn't actually notice much of that, but what I did notice was after that, my performance in the gym did improve. So my main focus now is I do weight training and then I'll sit on the cardio bike for a little while. Like I'm mostly doing weight training. And so I don't know, there's this deep unconscious desire to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger during the 70s. And it's never going to go away. I'm never letting that go.
I have the same issue, Jesse, but like then you get into your 40s and then all of a sudden your back or your hip starts hurting and you got to be a little
I'm there. I'm with you, brother.
You got to be a little more gentle.
Well, and it's certainly, and actually that was the impetus to become certified personal trainer.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand, okay, so I keep injuring myself, all these things. But anyway, so I did notice improvements in my gym performance. I noticed improvements in my blood panels. So the things that you want to go down started to go down. Things that you want to go up started to go up. And so now that has peaked. It's not changed from that point on. It's not gone down though, and I am getting older every year. So, so I'm happy with that. So even though it's expensive, that's the one that even if Intimate Bio suddenly just said no, you can't have it anymore, I would still be taking it. Now you mentioned HMB. HMB is an interesting one. I myself, when I take HMB, it doesn't agree with my stomach, and it sucks because of the research that I'm sorry?
Half a teaspoon? I usually take half a teaspoon to a quarter to a half of a teaspoon. How much are you taking?
Well, I've taken different ones over the years. Because what I do is I forget, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take this again. And so I've not had a lot of experience with HMB, but I will say
Mhm.
the older that we get, as far as the research goes, it looks really good, right? So it's this basically it's super leucine. So leucine being
Mhm.
the amino acid that is the main signaler for the anabolic response, so to build muscle. And so there's a lot of research, actually not a lot of research, but there's some research with HMB and creatine together, especially
Mhm.
to
And
help avoid.
I end up taking both of those on the same day. I might take creatine before a workout and HMB after a workout. And now it's kind of rare that I work out, but when I do, I try to do it right. Admittedly, they say the HMB is more. It's not so much an anabolic compound. It's more anti-catabolic. It helps protect the muscle fibers from being torn down too far. That way they build back up faster. So I was just throwing out there since you seem very well versed in all this nutrition store filled with supplements.
Yeah, yeah. What happens is when the older that we get, the harder it is to get that signal, right? So we want super leucine to get the signal, and and just because it's anabolic, so it is an anabolic signaler, right? To start using protein, it starts the protein synthesis process. And if we don't get it, we start to see muscle wasting. So this is one of the reasons why people would use it. People a lot of times will use it during cutting phases, but also people use it especially as we get older because we don't get, even if you're eating the same amount of protein, so whatever
Yeah.
amount of protein that you feel like you need to have, but anytime you get protein, you get your branched chain amino acids. One of those is leucine, and that's going to give you an anabolic signal.
Yeah.
And the older we get, the harder it is for us to pick up that anabolic signal. So HMB is sort of just super leucine uh,
Mhm.
that says, okay, we need to start protein synthesis now. So absolutely, they were right whenever we talk about it helps us avoid muscle wasting
Yeah.
as a way of saying we need to put protein into the muscle, which is also an anabolic signaler.
Yeah. What's interesting is what I like about you, Jesse, is you're like something's wrong with me, so I'm going to learn. Not necessarily something's wrong with me, but I'm
Yeah.
going on, so I'm going to learn everything I can about it. I'm going to get certified. I'm going to get my degree in this thing. I think that's so cool because then you do really are a teacher because you're so excited about like sharing this information. You're like, hey, this helped me and that kind of thing. And around COVID time, there was a lot of like, I don't even want to use any dismiss, whatever types of information going on. And one of the things was what supplements should you be taking? And people were saying everyone who's died of COVID or has, there's a lot of extremes going on around that time, right? But everyone who's died of COVID was low in vitamin D3, right? And then people were saying, so I was like, I could have everything, vitamin D3, zinc. I had everything everyone was saying. How do you feel about like just those general blanket supplements that they say everyone should take? Joe Rogan takes what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, what do you think?
Well,
Vitamin D.
I take a lot of supplements. I take vitamin D, but I will say this. The reason, so here we are. The reason why a lot of people take zinc, vitamin D, a lot of those things is because when we're deficient, it can open us up to having a weakened immune system,
Okay.
right? So that's typically the reason why people take these supplements. Elderberry inhibits viral replication and things like that. So, but it's like lo and behold, you're going to still catch a cold. Now, why is that, right? Because I don't care what you take.
Right.
I don't care what you're doing. If you have a healthy immune system, and let's emphasize that. If you have a healthy immune system, you will catch a cold, right?
Mhm.
That is because the immune system going through that secondary immune response, which we associate with cold and flu symptoms, that is a healthy immune system reacting the way it's supposed to react. Now, why is it that we catch colds? Okay, so the reason why we catch colds more in the winter, and we do catch colds more in the winter than we do other times of the year. There's a lot of wives' tales. There's a lot of repeated things that you've heard for the past 10 to 15 years. And one of them was because, hey, in the summertime, we are outside all the time. And then in the wintertime, we don't have any vitamin D. And then that's why we get sick, right? But hey, you're taking vitamin D and you're still going to catch a cold this year. I guarantee it. I've already caught a cold whenever I moved. Like, what is that? And then the other thing is like, well, the reason why we catch colds in the wintertime is because we're not we're not outside all the time like we are in the summertime. We're inside more. We're around other people more, and so we're gonna catch colds and flus, which still doesn't solve the riddle as to why those other people were catching the colds. But okay, so the transmutability or the transmission, we get that. However, having said that, not a lot of people in the modern world are outside all the time in the summertime either. So it's like, okay, so we're inside all the time, even in the summertime. So what is it about the winter time that makes us more susceptible to colds and flus? And this is, again, this is something I had to nerd out on. I had to figure it out because everyone was, and I am a proponent of cold training. And we know that simply being cold does not make you sick.
Many people will say it does, though.
And here's the reason why. Colds and flus, right? So the coronaviruses, that whole family, or the rhinovirus family. So we have a lot of colds and flus, the influenza, a lot of these viruses, they are what we call enveloped viruses. And what that means is that there is a membrane that covers the genetic material of that virus. Okay. And it's a protective membrane. When that membrane is in the presence of heat, it becomes permeable, and that genetic material becomes very easy to disrupt and destroy. When that genetic material is protected, it's more likely to replicate once it gets into your system. And it just so happens that the envelope is less permeable, and it's more durable whenever it's in colder temperatures. So whenever people are sneezing and things like that, okay, it comes in. And this is one of the reasons why we want to breathe through our nose, is because the nose at least is going to heat up a lot of that stuff, and it's going to help you a lot. There's turbinates in there that will cover those things with mucus, and so you stand a far lower chance of coming down with that cold or flu if you're breathing in and out through your nose. But there is research that shows that still your nose is cooler than your internal body temperature. And this is why maintaining internal body temperature is important. This is one of the reasons why cold training helps us to stay healthier, in my opinion. This is a personal belief, but it does help us to thermoregulate better. So you're practicing thermoregulation. So body temperature is really helpful in that it's a hostile environment for these viruses. When we breathe through the mouth, it just goes right down to your lungs. I mean, it's pretty easy to get sick that way.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's why that is. And hey, you do want to take vitamin D for a lot of reasons. Zinc is great for a lot of reasons, and it is possible that you will have a higher white blood cell count, and you will reduce the ability of that virus to replicate. So those are good things to do. So I would say to continue to do those things. I still take those supplements myself. And you'll reduce your suffering time or the amount of suffering that you have.
Good. Yeah.
But it's not. But the thing is, in the wintertime, it is important to understand that is why you're more likely to catch a cold or flu. It's nothing wrong with you.
Explained that before. That was super interesting to me. I'm going to look into that further. I've gone back and forth. People like, it's not like you're just catching a cold. Like that the phrase is like, oh, just caught a cold. It just bounced off my head or something while I was walking outside in winter, right?
Well, we get that metaphor. So I talk about the metaphor of we're a machine, right? And how we need to outgrow that, right? It was very useful. It was more useful than what came before, which was the 4 humors, right? So we used to believe we're made of these 4 liquids. If you get too warm or too cold or too dry or too wet, then those humors will become unbalanced, and then you'll get sick. One of those things was if you get too cold, and that's where we get this. You caught a cold, right? It's because your humors were too cold, and so now we need to make you warm. What would make you warm? Well, let's see, a rooster, or maybe some wine. Wine makes you feel warm, right? And so we got a lot of these people, a lot of these remedies from this time whenever, and it was better than what came before it. What came before it was just like, okay, you must have done something bad, so that's why you're sick. So there
evolving our understanding of how we exist in our environment. That's what we're doing, right? That's what you're trying to do. That's cool. Yeah. So as far as nasal breathing, I wanted to comment on that or just ask you about that. So I went like deep on what was it called? Breath by James Nestor. I think
James Nestor, classic. He's the breathing guy. Yeah.
Listen to that all the way on a drive from South Dakota back to Atlanta one time, and just blew my mind. I don't want to go in the weeds on the book, but just the idea of how like we evolved to start like to in the modern times through our food, how we eat and stuff, the great chewing less and, that kind of thing, made our jaws smaller, made our, basically changed the maxillofacial structure to make it more difficult to breathe through your nose. And I remember
I'm a big fan of chewing my food.
Nose. So I remember going to people's houses that smelled funny when I was a kid and completely shutting down and then only breathing through my mouth and only being able to like take these short breaths. And all of a sudden I get anxious and I'm like 6. So I don't know how to explain this to anyone. Right. But then I'm like listening to this book and I'm going, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense to me because I've had that. I will go back and forth. I'll alternate from nose to mouth breathing. But now that I'm more of an aware and adult, I can actually see, I'll notice the biochemistry change almost, for lack of a better word, the difference between like how I feel if I don't switch back and forth. So even in a nutshell, could you explain to our audience like the importance of trying to most of the time breathe through your nose?
Yeah. So your nose is the first part of your sinuses. Your sinuses, they take up a large amount of real estate in your head. So it's not for just no reason. Your sinuses are there to filter, to hydrate, to temperature regulate every breath that you take. Breathing through your nose is about 50% more difficult than breathing through our mouth. So a lot of times we feel like we'll go to the mouth breathing because it's more expedient. Also, we talk through our mouth, right? So breathing through your mouth is what I'm doing right now. And so it's one of those things where, and here's the thing, after I do interviews, and I talk for a living, that's what I've been a professor, this is literally what I do. And after long bouts of talking, like I try to inhale through the nose, but but the reality is even whenever you're just exhaling through your nose will get a little more stuffy.
Yeah.
And it makes it more difficult. You sort of have this feedback loop. So you want to inhale and exhale through your nose as much as you can, especially now that we're coming into the winter months. I don't know, where are you guys located?
We were in Georgia, North Georgia.
Okay. So imagine the coldest day that you have times 1,000, and that's what the northern part of.
So I'm actually from Iowa and grew up.
Okay.
So I got you. I get it.
So
Mike's
ultimately,
from Texas, so he doesn't count.
well, Texas. Okay, Texas, Mike. That's where you're from.
I'm just kidding.
I have seen snow. Yeah, I lived in Virginia for a while.
Actually,
I've seen cold weather before.
But Texas is a great example too. So in both cases, whenever it's too hot or too cold, right? So in arid climate, so whenever it gets really cold, right, the air gets really dry. And whenever it gets, like for instance, there's certain parts of Texas you need a humidifier just because your air is so dry, right? So not all of that. Texas is
way out west. There's multiple climates. I grew up in this part, so yeah, humid subtropical. I know what's up.
Okay. But ultimately, the dry air. So dry air, it can really irritate your bronchi, your bronchioli, alveoli. It can really irritate all this if you're not breathing through your nose. So it really is important to do that. It's also important to hydrate your air if you can, because it's easier on your nose. You have these things in your sinuses called turbinates, and these turbinates are covered with mucus as long as you're not dehydrated. And they pick up a lot of what's in the air. So they cover it up with mucus, and that's full of white blood cells. It kills all the stuff that's there, and it passes through. And in most cases, as whenever you do this, you never notice. It's just part of your daily experience. Occasionally, there will be a virus that will implant itself somewhere in the nose. But it's better there than if you were to breathe in through the mouth and just bypass all that and bring it right down into your lungs. Yeah. Mouth breathing is not necessarily a bad thing. There is a time and a place for it. And whenever I train athletes, we teach athletes how to breathe appropriately for the metabolic load that we're putting them under. But in most cases, mouth breathing leads to to shallow chest breathing and breathing faster than you would have to breathe. And these are signalers for your nervous system that, hey, maybe we're in an unsafe situation. Maybe we need to be afraid. And that's why you had those anxiety signals and those nervous signals.
Yes.
So,
Taking a conscious control of your breathing in those moments with those athletes, you're teaching them how to kind of have more of a conscious regulation of that.
right.
And then does that help with, can that help them with obviously jitters and stuff, performance jitters probably as well?
Yeah, and what I do with athletes is slowly but surely train them to ultimately do dead sprints, nasal breathing. So when I train, for instance, the jiu-jitsu competitors, what we try to do is of course and you know this, the difference between your first day at jiu-jitsu versus your third year is the amount of energy that you will put into every, like it's like chaos, right? And you're just saying you're trying to slow down, but if you go too slow, then the next person they get you in an arm bar or something like that. So you're what you're trying to do is stay consciously aware so you can make better decisions. And the problem is our nervous system, whenever we don't regulate it, it actually shuts down parts of your brain that are really important for decision making. So what we do with athletes is, and just in general, this is the everyday person can learn from this, is we try to throttle the, if we're using the old metaphor, but we're trying to throttle the stress response. We're trying to let that unconscious part of you understand that we're not really in as much danger as it might believe that we are, and that we don't need to go, completely fight or flight or super into a stress state, that we need to relax a little bit more. Now, that doesn't mean we're staying relaxed. That doesn't mean you're just like chilling out and going on a nap, but it does mean that instead of doing the anxious energy, like I remember when I was doing jiu-jitsu, and I just fell out of it after COVID. My gym shut down, and I just never got back into it. I got really busy with other things. But I remember whenever a person would come in, it was the easiest way to get injured was to roll with someone who had never done it before, because they have no control, right? Mm-hmm. And they're using like 100% energy in every movement, and just they're getting gassed real fast. And then all you have to do is really just kind of wait them out, and then they would get gassed, and then you just, okay, now I'm going to put you into the, Kimura or something like that. But the thing is, nasal breathing can help us avoid that kind of hyper awareness, hyper, activity.
I imagine it takes quite a lot of like forethought and like training to get someone from like not understanding this concept at all to all of a sudden being able to do full sprints. I know there's a fighter I really like named Sean O'Malley and his coach, Tim Welch. They're big into nasal breathing. And if you watch Sean when he's fighting, and I think it's why he makes very good decisions and stays calm, is because he's basically attempting to breathe through his nose as much as possible. You think that's probably affecting that decision making, right, at that high level of performance?
Yeah, well, and you got to remember we are organisms of action, and we're safety seeking, and part of that, our ancient ancestors, it was not to your benefit to stick around and think about it.
Yeah.
So those things shut down, and then you get an enormous amount of energy, and you run or you fight and kill something. It wasn't a matter of skilled combat so much as just ferocious, fighting. Now we have, especially when it comes to combat sports, I mean, highly technical things that are also in the realm of this heightened state of, of sympathetic dominance. So the key that we see in athletes, and this is both with combat sports, with all other sports, is that the frequency of errors are significantly reduced when we can train you to have a breath protocol. And that is generally going to include nasal breathing, unless you're a swimmer, right? Swimmers, we don't recommend. But
that makes sense. We're coming up on 90 minutes. We're at 90 minutes, Jesse. So I don't know how much time you have left, and we should probably start like rounding up the conversation.
Yeah.
The back half. We said an hour, so I just wanted to check in with you on that.
90 minutes is good.
Okay, cool. There was a few. I have a couple questions I want to start asking everyone. You dabbled in it a little bit, and I know you've paid a lot, like in this conversation, and I know that you even mentioned it, and a lot of what you talk about, as far as us being creatures of action and all these unconscious processes happening and whatnot. How much free will do we have, according to Jesse Coomer? And I know that's a deep question that you're not going to answer in 5 seconds, but do you believe in free will?
So yes, and so and I'll unpack that slightly here, just because there's a bunch of different ways a person looks at free will. There's the whole the spiritual way of looking at it. Well, if God knows the future, then I make those same decisions. Then I'm not looking at it like that. I'm looking at it as what is free will. And so most of the time, people they'll say, well, we don't have free will because all of our decisions are filtered through unconscious processes that lead us to take these actions, and our conscious awareness, our conscious thinking is such a small amount of that process that they say there's no free will. But I'd say, I honestly do think that that once you start to understand, okay, that both conscious and unconscious you is still you. Like if you took the unconscious you out of you, you would be dead. Not just and let's suppose we just left all the systems on, all the automatic systems on, you would not be the person you are today. Like there's no part of you that that is just like, okay, just conscious me is here. And like everything from your preferences to your sense of humor, to your personality, to the things that you want in life is this combination of conscious and unconscious you. And I believe that we have the ability to work within that, because both of those aspects of a person is you. And so I do think regardless of what you do, you wanted to do it, whether it's on a conscious level or unconscious level or both, it was your decision. And so that's where I say we do have free will.
Interesting. I love the question. So I like and asking different people it, and so there's that. And then this is just something I ask everyone I meet pretty much. Have you ever seen a UFO, Jesse?
No, I haven't.
No.
I don't know if I want to. I guess I need to go to the ocean now to see them. But no, I've never seen one.
Close to San Diego every day.
So
I haven't either. I just if people have, I'd like to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, you would hate to have a guest who saw a UFO and you just didn't know, right? So exactly. I'm there.
Exactly. Mike, anything to wrap it up?
That was cool. Thanks for coming on the show, Jesse.
Yeah,
it's been a real pleasure.
And we'll do you want to plug any of your stuff right now real quick?
Yeah. So if you'd like to learn more about the Language of Breath certification, we are taking applications up until March of 2024 and or until the class fills. We're about 1/3 full right now, and we do expect it to be completely full by March. What we do is we do a virtual portion that starts April 5th, and we go from April 5th to July 20th. And every weekend we get together for 2 hours virtually. And then in July, we get together and we're for a 4-day in-person capstone training. So you get hands-on training. We set you up with everything that you're going to need to add breathwork to your practice and to your business. So that is available at languageofbreathcollective.com, or you can reach out to me at jessecoomer.com and find out how to get in on that. Also, that's where, if you want to find out where my events are, where I will be, you can go to jessecoomer.com, click on the events page. Lastly, if you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I do have 2 slots that just recently opened up, and I'd be happy to talk to you and see if working with me is going to be right for you.
Awesome. Jesse, thank you so much. This was an honor for me and a pleasure. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.